So I'd like to introduce our guests. We have James Donovan, who is the head of cognitive outcomes research at OpenAI. Don't know if you've heard about that company. We have Ivo Visak, CEO of AI Leap Foundation, all the way here from Estonia. So thank you for being awake with us right now. Carol Dweck, who you may have heard of. My students who are here should have, because you have assigned readings from her due this week. But she's the Lewis and Virginia Eaton Professor of Psychology and a professor by courtesy in the Graduate School of Education. And John Mitchell, the Mary Gordon Crary Family Professor and Professor of Computer Science. And also probably the gentleman on campus who I think wears sweaters the best consistently to moderate. So please come on up. We would love to have you talk about learning that lasts. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Ivo. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. Great group. We're going to have a good discussion here for about 40 minutes or so. So I think we're going to talk about our changing times as AI reshapes what and how we learn. So I'll start with a couple questions and then we'll have some discussion here. So what does it mean to design learning that lasts? Learning that cultivates curiosity, resilience, and purpose rather than just efficiency or performance on standardized tests, things like that. And then how can AI help? How can AI serve as a learning partner that strengthens human capacities like reflection, motivation, connection, instead of just replacing them? So what I'd like to start with is a little bit of a brief self-introduction rather than me say something about the other people on the panel. Let's let them introduce themselves a little bit more if you want. I think one of us needs no introduction, so we'll start there. Just from Carol, you want to?
I'm a professor of psychology and I have a courtesy appointment in the Ed School. I am delighted to be here because my entire career has been devoted to learning that lasts.
Ivo?
Hi, my name is Ivo. From Estonia, as it was previously said. Been a school principal for the past 5 years. For some reason, they decided 30-year-old suits for a high school. And for the past almost 6 months, I've been leading the Estonian initiative to, in a, let's say, positive but critical way, trying to integrate AI into education and what it really means. So trying to figure it out in the European Union as the first country in that.
All right, Robert?
Pleasure to be here. Love to see you all. What an honor to be on stage with so many luminaries. James Donovan. I look after our cognitive outcomes research at OpenAI. It's a bit of a mouthful title, but in essence, I look after what we understand about how the use of AI affects human cognition, a very large part of which is learning and education.
Great, thank you all for being here. Maybe we could start out, Carol, could you start us off with your perspective on learning that lasts, what cultivates curiosity, resilience, purpose, other goals that we might have?
Yes, I will. As I mentioned, my research, my teaching, all has been oriented toward learning that lasts. How do we help kids take on challenges? How do we help them maintain high levels of engagement? How do we help them to persist in the face of obstacles and to keep on learning? In my work, I found that students holding a growth mindset, or when we teach them a growth mindset, that is the idea that their intellectual abilities can be developed. They show more of these qualities and do better over time. In one study, it kind of modeled Bob Hoover's experience as he made the transition to high school and was daunted by the math and the difficulty and the inscrutability of the material. In this study, we worked with a nationally representative sample of over 12,000 students. Half of them got a self-administered growth mindset program that we had worked on. It was only 50 minutes, but we worked on it and developed it for over 2 years and iteratively tested it. Students in the experimental condition got higher grades at the end of the year, particularly the students who were got lower grades, were below the median in their high school. They had higher grade point than the control group at the end of the year. Across achievement levels, the students in our study were more likely to take advanced math the year later. And we followed them through high school. More students in the experimental group were graduating with college-ready portfolios, meaning they had followed a rigorous curriculum that involved advanced course taking. But we were also interested in where it didn't work. Who were the students who didn't benefit from our wonderful program, even though they did all the good things within the program, chose hard problems, etc.? And the answer is, it was the students who went into classrooms, and we focused on math classrooms, with teachers who held a fixed mindset, that each student has their ability, and that's that. And they organized their classrooms around that concept. What do we do now? And led by my former student, a PhD from here, we decided to change classroom cultures, particularly for teachers who held more of a fixed mindset, to foster a learning that lasts. So let me see, I will. So we called it a culture of learning. It's a growth mindset culture, but we didn't want to scare the fixed mindset teachers off. We called it culture of learning. Our aim was to develop something scalable, something that wasn't onerous for teachers given their already overworked selves. So a lot of the program had teachers develop ways of talking to students. Like the first day of school, they were to give a speech saying essentially, I know many of you have had bad experiences in math, but I believe all of you are capable of learning this material to a high level, and I will be here to make sure that happens. Teachers also periodically urged students to raise their hands when they were confused, because, the teacher said, raising your hands when you're confused makes me a better teacher. I know what I have to explain better. So you see the teachers removing these obstacles. The day before a test, the teacher says, a test doesn't measure you. A test tells me where you are now and what you need to learn so I can help you. And then, after the test, the teacher reiterates that and meets with students to do what we call collaborative troubleshooting. They work together to appreciate what the student did understand, the steps of the problem they did, and where they misunderstood. Okay. We've done several studies creating the culture of learning. In the latest one, which was with the largest sample of teachers and students, we found that the students indeed showed a higher level of engagement in terms of challenge seeking, in terms of sticking to tasks that were hard. They did better than the control group on an achievement test, questions from a validated achievement test that we gave them. And most cherished finding. The experimental group had a much higher level of teacher well-being. Teachers reported satisfaction with life. By the way, the control group was pretty good. The teachers loved it. It was the cognitive science of learning. But it did not create the culture of learning that we did. I can go on to say a little more about how we use it.
Why don't we come back to you in a little bit?
Happy to come back to it.
Great. Yeah, they're really all excellent observations and things we can all learn from. Ivo, Estonia is pioneering a national digital learning infrastructure. What's your experience with effective learning, and what are some takeaways that others might benefit from what you've been doing the last couple of years?
Yeah, so maybe I think I have to go back to history when I was like 6 years old. So I'm, of course, the most right person to talk about it. But around 1995, 1996, Estonia went through this Tiger Leap program, which was mostly involving making sure that the whole Estonian education system goes digitalization really quickly. It's still considered one of the most successful educational digital projects in the region. And basically, if we now look at how old these teachers are who got this training back then, they have almost been on the market almost 30 years. So a lot of my colleagues, when I had the privilege to create the new high school, then a lot of my colleagues were from age group who had gotten that training almost 30 years ago. So it means that a lot of these questions about digital tools in the education system, they aren't something that's sort of out of this world. They will kind of always been there. It's rather the question of when and why should we use them. And that also comes to the sort of the general philosophy on how Estonian education system is built up. So it's a very goal-oriented education system, as in there isn't really a road on how Estonian teacher has to get to the goal. It's rather that the goal is set, and the teacher chooses his or her own curriculum to get to this goal, which also means that it gives a lot of freedom to the teacher. It also gives, of course, it in a sense makes the teachers' jobs a bit harder also, because a lot of the materials, even though of course there are textbooks and things to use, it also means that the teacher sort of picks and chooses what he or she likes. I think one of the main things though in Estonian education system still is that there is still a very high belief into public school system. It's very, very high. Even through PISA tests where we have done quite well for some time, the growth mindset is the top in Estonian education system in the world. So this is, I think it is strongly to do with the public school system is the dominant school system. Private schools are very scarce. Private schools mostly are to do with, so there is like 2-3 private schools that are high schools. There are a few more that are sort of for elementary education system. But all of the main drivers in the education system is public. It also means that when we are doing, AI Leap is doing the AI literacy training for all the Estonian high school teachers. So everybody will get it. Everyone will get the tools. And through that, you can sort of push the whole education system to some sort of a new bar. But at the same time, we kind of keep in mind that this technology is very new. And there isn't really that much measurements done on is it really helpful for one or another thing, or is it even bad for one or another thing? So in that sense, we are very happy that we have had the possibility with University of Tartu and University of Stanford and with OpenAI to have a research project together where we are examining on how these tools really, when set to certain right metrics, affect the educational system and how do they affect the students themselves. So there is still a very long road to go. There is a lot of hype in this world. We have to be very careful with this hype. And in this hype, we kind of have to sort of find this golden path on where this kind of truth really is. So there is good in this, but there is quite a lot of things that are very uncertain, and some of the bandwagoning has to be sort of very step by step. But the teachers need help now. So I would say that one of the key things which has helped these projects in Estonia is that nobody has ever forgotten the teachers. So teachers need help now, and you need to have national, state level programs for teachers, because the teachers are the people who set the tone in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and it sounds like we should have you back in a year or two to tell us how this all works out and what you learn and where things go. So James, we've heard a little bit about principles of learning and contexts that are meaningful and effective both for students and for teachers, and a little bit about the constraints and organizational structure of school systems. How are you and OpenAI thinking about the role of AI in learning, how that can be helpful? What are some things we can aspire to, some ambitious things, and what are some downsides or risks or potential unintended consequences you think we might also want to pay attention to?
Of course. Well, I mean, one immediate litmus test of all this will be whether, when Ivo comes back, I'm still sat next to him, whether he doesn't want to talk to me anymore.
Well, the chair's here, so we'll see what happens.
Exactly. If I'm empty-chaired, we'll know that it's gone terribly wrong in Estonia. It really is important to walk this golden path, as Ivo has mentioned, because we do operate in a space with AI in which people do tend to make very aggressive extrapolations on capabilities, on impact. And that narrative hasn't helped, I think, get to a place where it's actually practical for teachers or for learners or really for the wider ecosystem. So a lot of the work we're doing is to try and understand how do we build the foundations in data and research and capabilities more broadly, and get those into the public domain so that we can try and have an informed conversation. We wouldn't be able to do it without partners like Stanford, without partners like the LEAP Foundation. So I'm really pleased that the volume of that work is picking up and the quality of it is growing from here. I think it's sort of critically important that we don't start with the technology and then try and fit humans into that, but start from the human outcomes that we want to see happening. I look at a lot of different types of cognitive outcome, but you could broadly bundle that up into human flourishing, what needs to be true for human flourishing to occur. And then we work our way down into things like learning, which I see as a critical cornerstone of human agency and human flourishing more broadly. And so when we look at that, we say, well, what are the fundamental characteristics that will improve human agency through learning? And that then structures the rest of the technology stack that we build out. We take a relatively neuroscience or biologically informed view on this, which is partly because that was my work before OpenAI. And so we ask questions like, the default models that we create are typically designed for productivity. Productivity is really about how do you get to an answer as quickly as possible. That's clearly in opposition to good pedagogical strategy and doesn't help when people are actually trying to learn versus get to an answer. How do we explore ways to train the models or give the models new behaviors that sync better with human learning, which would be things like fostering internalization, which is all about memory, spatial repetition, things like that. Engagement, of course, is a major thing. That engagement can be generated by the model, but also needs to become autonomous motivation, things like that. Transfer is another big category where we try and figure out how can the models ask questions that facilitate creativity, critical thinking, and so on. And I think the part of the model design question is really that we don't see a big distinction between the development of cognitive skills and any other type of skill, in as much as saying, if you watch a lot of tennis, you don't become a great tennis player. If you talk about critical thinking but never do it, you don't become a great critical thinker. And the models need to be able to dynamically nudge that behavior as you use them passively. The first instance of that were things like study mode, which was really a tiny step and started off as a research alpha. But that was an example of us saying, what if we change the fundamental personality and behaviors of the model to see whether it can elicit learning better? And we hope over time that what we'll end up doing is generating the data which will flow into the public domain from research projects like this, but also with a number of other countries and school districts around the world, to figure out what should that default behavior set be for the models as they interact with humans to elicit these cognitive capabilities, make that the new baseline figure out how to make sure that everyone who benefits from the model gets over that baseline and therefore can use other tools and other more sophisticated interventions.
I mean, I've seen a lot of evaluations of models, OpenAI's and others, that suggest not such bad behavior on content knowledge. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had hallucinations and things that are unreliable, but also improvements in that direction. But pretty low scores on pedagogical content knowledge. Mm-hmm. And other things like that would be important in learning. What do you think? I mean, do you think the model is just going to get better and then we'll just stick a model in a room with people? Or do you think there's some other kind of infrastructure that has to be built around it? Where does AI sit in relation to students, teachers, life of a child, life of parents, and adult learners? What do you think goes along with the model? Do you have a sense about that or an idea?
Yeah, I mean, I do think about this a lot. We have to, technically it needs to be broken down across different dimensions. One thing, and it's worth saying, though I think everyone in this room would agree, much of human cognition is social in its orientation. Therefore, there should never be a world in which you're trying to totally intermediate human-to-human interactions via AI. And even if you could do that, I suspect the outcome would be pretty disastrous, so we really don't want to go in that direction. And that means thinking through experiences that are inherently multiplayer, experiences that are totally separate to AI, where there's no AI involved, thinking through experiences that are trying to embody people in the real world versus just being in some sort of digital space that they're working in. And that requires direct integration into classrooms, into family life.
Yeah, so there's some
that's all of that.
environment and ecosystem around the model. And
then there's a whole bunch of new evaluations that need to exist. The standard in AI land is single or multi-turn evaluations, which is effectively you write a fake conversation and see how the model would respond to it. Clearly, that's not realistic to emergent characteristics in the real world. And part of the work we're doing with Estonia is to develop a novel evaluation suite that looks at live, real learning, and looks at it dynamically over time. So our study is longitudinal in order to try and understand not just in a particular context was the model right or wrong, but across every context, and across different times, and across different moments of learning, how do those behaviors exist? And the way we get to that is that we have a sort of long list of behaviors that we're trying to get the model to emulate, and then we evaluate the quality of each behavior, plus how humans have reacted to that behavior over time. Yeah. Because that is one other big open question. Even if the AI models can perfectly mimic a teacher or tutor, it's not clear that humans will react in the same way. They may have a very different relationship to the models, and therefore you might need different behaviors that go in, which is one limitation of the pedagogical evaluations today, is that they apply to AIs mimicking humans, but we don't even know if that's necessarily the right strategy.
That's the best thing. We have limited time here, so I want to just
of course, please.
Move along a little bit. Carol, do you want to give us any examples? Do you think AI is going to be useful in any of the things that you're doing, or anything in that direction you want to point to as positive?
Yeah, I'll talk briefly about how we've begun to use AI to create the culture of learning, or to mentor teachers in creating the culture.
Right, and then I think we have an interesting group of panelists here. We do have time for a few audience questions. Let's try to work those in, and then we'll try to wrap up in about 15 minutes. So,
okay.
Help us go forward here.
So we couldn't do anything with off-the-shelf tools, but we started by having, for the teacher's first day of school speech, having growth mindset, culture of learning experts, amazing teachers write their own letters. And we found that the AI could have 90% accuracy after a short time in giving appropriate and helpful iterative feedback to teachers on their speech.
So this is really helpful in getting teachers to adopt a methodology. You think a teacher supports tool from AI is an effective direction. Thank you.
We think there's real promise for AI, but it needs specialty training informed. An app from a developer or company like the Khan Academy could create a specially tuned model, or it could happen within a big company that owns an underlying model like OpenAI, Google, Meta. They could retrain their model or set parameters. David Yeager is in talks with Google. Gemini could be trained to default to a culture of learning where appropriate, to give that kind of advice. We think there are three major applications of AI and ed tech for our growth mindset culture of learning. First, I mentioned the drafts of the culture of learning material with feedback. Second, teachers can record themselves or video themselves in the classroom, and the app can give feedback. We are developing this with an NSF grant. Yes, they still exist to some degree.
Somebody's got one good. Okay, that's good to hear.
And we're also working in partnership with TeachFX to make this happen. And third, we really aspire to teacher training with a virtual student, a teacher interacting with a student with an avatar, with a virtual student who has a fixed mindset, is afraid of challenges, is thrown off by mistakes. And the teachers, we hope, would really be able to tune their conversation to bring the student forward. And we also wonder, relating to what you were talking about, whether teachers could be supported in their troubleshooting, collaborative troubleshooting with students, going over test problems, to understand how and when to give appropriate feedback. We'd be delighted to hear more about that.
I think the simulation framework is really very effective. And people wonder, is AI really going to behave like an actual student? But I think if you think about air flight simulations, nobody confuses the flight simulator with flying an actual plane. What's important is that it gives you some practice and some feedback and helps you rehearse so that when you're in another environment, you're more effective. So I like those applications. I'm very curious, given the expertise we have here, what people in the audience are thinking. I don't know if there's somebody with a microphone that could go around. It's a little hard to see with the lights here, but if someone shows up with a question, we'd be, shows up with an audience, speaks a question. All right, raise your hand or make yourself known to whoever's wandering around with a microphone. Oh, the microphone's fixed. All right, hard to see. Go for it. Anybody have?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm
What do you
Bethany.
think? Do you want to hear?
So I would argue perhaps that users have spoken and they don't want the same kind of data bifurcation between formal and informal learning that we kind of have structured. So how do you guys think about how we should change data structures between formal and informal learning going forward with AI?
Yeah, that's great. Maybe we'll try to give quick answers and so we get as many. Ivo, that sounds like a question for you as a kind of a...
Yeah. So maybe one of the key things is that we're not even really sure right now on what are the situations when the students are going to use these things. So one of the things is that if they're going to use these tools in a school environment, that's one thing. Another thing is that when they're using it outside of the school, using it for completely different kind of tasks that maybe are not in any way school work oriented. So in that sense, there is clearly a way to sort of see when these interactions happen, and then through that there is a way to create the separation from data that's clearly used during the Estonian school hours and the data that's used during something else. I think the biggest question though is that we should not get caught in this idea that AI tools now suddenly are changing the whole schooling of the Estonian education system. The Estonian education system needs quite a bit of different tinkerings in here and there. There are certain very clear flaws in our education system where we are also eager to kind of really look under the hood while we're dealing with this thing also. But most of the learning, we still firmly believe, are human-to-human interaction. And the main question is, in the end of the day, where is the AI really closing in the loop in a positive way? So there is often something missing in these interactions, and the interaction missing is often with the students who are left behind. A lot of the tools are catered towards the best of the student, creating a huge divides in the society. And that's something we are very careful in Estonian society, that this is not a tool for an even bigger divide. So that's also a data that we're really, really interested on making sure that the kids throughout Estonia, wherever they are, whatever type of school they are, they use it, and we get sort of very clearly separate the use cases.
That's
we are
great.
mapping that also.
I really like the question too. If I look back at my own experience, I think I liked about 7 teachers. And I overall sort of hated school, but I love learning. So I think there's, I don't know if that's representative of other people. Maybe that's how I ended up here. There was another microphone over here. Somebody with a question? Yeah, go for it. What's up?
Not me, but I'm curious if others have a question.
You're curious
You're
if there's
closer
a
to
question. That's a meta question. Nobody has a question? I mean, we can talk. We have plenty of experience doing that. But
Can you hear me?
happy to hear.
Okay, I have a question for you. I was curious if you could speak more about the longitudinal study you're doing in partnership with Estonia, and are there plans to replicate in other contexts, particularly representative of the diversity here in the US?
Short answers, yes and yes. We are.
You're open for business. Is that okay? So.
Would I describe it as open for business? Maybe not. But the idea is to replicate with other studies around the world, including in the US and US school districts, certainly. Do you want to talk to the actual nature of the study?
Yeah, well, one of the main things probably is that even in Estonia, when we're looking at this study from the perspective of we are looking not so much about the knowledge building aspect of it, because this is also, and I very firmly believe that what Professor Schwartz before said, that there is a very clear distinction that there can't be this kind of idea of using these tools without previous knowledge. I'm very careful about this attitude. There has to be a foundation building, and from grades 1 to 9, the foundation buildings are essential. We are talking about high school use of these tools. We are very careful when we go into younger years. So here we are doing a very clear distinction. Everything before high school is foundation building. From there onwards, we can really start AI tinkering. We can really start using these kind of playful moments. And maybe again, our study is kind of a reaction towards our own PISA tests also. So in PISA, we're doing like really good. In Europe, #1, so basically really happy about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of certain moments where we have PISA blindness also. So even though our students and have like a growth mindset, there are clear distinctions, and we clearly see that they are lacking certain skills. So metacognitional thinking is something we clearly see that it's kind of reflecting on why we are even doing this. What is this process about? This is clearly lacking in the process. Another aspect is sort of this kind of a general well-being, but maybe it's because the lack of D vitamin in our neighborhoods in the far north. Anyway, yeah, we are more eager to see a lot of these kind of aspects that are not to do with knowledge building, but rather how we think, what are the ways on how we really construct what we know is learning.
Great. Love that phrase, PISA blindness. I'll take that home. I have a note from whoever writes notes saying last question at 10:35. So if you have one last question, you want to sneak in, say it quickly, and grab the microphone and be proactive here.
I have a question alluding to something that Professor Dweck mentioned about shifting the culture of learning in the classroom. That's easy to be said than done. So with this introduction of AI and technology evolution, if you have to give one advice, what would that be? Because there's different comfort level and different resistance level in terms of amongst educators.
Great. Carol, is that for you, or who would like to comment?
Yes, so.
Oh, okay. And then I'll give a chance for each of you to make a kind of final thoughts, please.
Yeah. So easier said than done. I agree 100%. And that's why over the past years, we've been slowly developing, testing it with teachers. The teachers are enthusiastic, and we want to help them more and more to be able to put these practices put these techniques into practice. But we don't think we have a finished product. We want to work with you guys more and more to see how we can bring technology in to help us bring our programs to fruition. I didn't hear the end of your question, but I hope that answers it.
Right. We can all see like the countdown here. So let's take the last 3 minutes and 38, 37, 36 seconds to kind of start from audiences left to right. And just what are your final thoughts on this? And do you have any advice or things that people could take away? Our audience really has academics, educators, some students from Stanford and elsewhere here. Any kind of thoughts or recommendations or insights for any one of those groups in 3:16 or less?
Who are you talking to?
Well, why don't we start with you and go across? If you have any final concluding thoughts for the panel,
I have not a concluding thought, I have a concluding feeling.
All right, let's go with that. Sounds good.
I'm excited.
All right.
I know very little about AI per se, the deep issues, but I think today I have a sense of how it's meshing with education in ways we really care about and in very thoughtful ways. So
that's great. I love that idea. And I think in relation to other kind of technological innovations that I've seen and been part of, there's a much greater sense of collaboration here among technology people and educators, and everyone sort of has an idea of how to move forward in a constructive way. So I think it's a really wonderful time, and there are many things that could go wrong, but also many things that could go right, and a good feeling of optimism is great. Ivo, any thoughts for them?
Yeah, so maybe...
More feelings?
I think the general feeling is that there's a lot of political communication going on internationally also, that a lot of these projects are pedagogy first or technology first. I think it is very intertwined, so it's an entangled pedagogy that's happening right now. So it's really starting to take shape, that has been sort of slowly growing into something new. The other thing that I am excited about, that more and more countries are sort of starting to understand that we have to help teachers. Like we can't wait it out anymore. So teachers are essentials. They need help, and then you can't leave the teachers alone in this situation. So just I think yesterday or today, Iceland announced that they are starting their project together with Anthropic to help teachers. So anyway, my maybe last shout out, if you are from different states here, representing your state, come and talk with me, because we are really eager to find sparring partners from US states also, because the fact is that we're kind of alone in Europe right now, and we need to have good people to exchange ideas with. Thank you very much.
Great. James, OpenAI dropped the big bomb. And people must come to you with their thoughts one way or another. What's your kind of summary of where you think AI is going, how it can be helpful? How should we think about the big model providers and big corporate actors in this space? Any final thoughts for all of us?
Big question for 32 seconds.
You can go over by 10 or 12 seconds.
That's very kind of you, thank you. For researchers, I think the main thing I would leave with everyone is we as a field need to move away from static evaluations and into dynamic evaluations for anything that touches human behavior. And they need to be longitudinal because there's a lot of emergent properties that we were somewhat blind to and we're learning about now. For students, I'd really emphasize the importance of metacognitive capabilities. The biggest correlations we see in use is that people who have strong metacognitive capabilities, tolerance for cognitive friction, emotional regulation, attention regulation, stuff like that, they benefit the most. So that's a really important skill set to develop. And then for teachers and students to some degree, for any frontier technology that's very jagged, like AI or LLM specifically, experimentation, lots and lots of small experiments where you get concrete feedback is the best way to understand both what does it mean to be on the frontier and have a rich data-informed approach to what to do next.
Great. All right. Well, we need to wrap up now. I think we'll all be around. If you want to catch one of the panelists, coffee break is a good time. So let's thank the panelists and